The life and reign of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, is a captivating tale marked by political intrigue, alliances, and personal relationships that shape the destiny of an ancient kingdom. In this narrative, we delve into the second-to-last and final episodes of Cleopatra's dramatic journey, exploring the challenges she faced upon ascending the throne, her complex relationship with Julius Caesar, and the consequential involvement with Mark Antony. The story unfolds against the backdrop of a changing Roman Republic as Cleopatra navigates the treacherous waters of power dynamics, familial conflicts, and ultimately, her tragic downfall. Join us as we unravel the intricate web of events that led to the Battle of Actium and Cleopatra's ultimate demise, leaving an indelible mark on the pages of history. Accession to the throne. Ptolemy XII passed away prior to March 22, 51 BC, prompting Cleopatra to assume the throne. Her inaugural actions as queen involved a journey to Hermondus near Thebes to oversee the installation of a new sacred Buccis bull, revered as an intermediary for the god Muntu in ancient Egyptian religious practices. However, Cleopatra immediately confronted a series of urgent issues. Upon ascending the throne, Cleopatra had to contend with a famine resulting from drought and insufficient annual flooding of the Nile. The Gabiniani, Roman soldiers previously stationed by Gabinius and now unemployed and assimilated into Egyptian society, fueled lawlessness. In addition to these challenges, Cleopatra inherited her father's debts, owing the Roman Republic a substantial sum of 17.5 million drachmas. These multifaceted challenges ranged from managing natural disasters affecting agriculture to addressing internal security threats posed by the Gabiniani and navigating significant financial obligations to Rome. Cleopatra's early reign was characterized by her efforts to stabilize the kingdom and overcome these pressing issues, setting the stage for her historical legacy as a formidable and influential leader. In 50 BC, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, proconsul of Syria, dispatched his two eldest sons to Egypt, likely to negotiate with the Gabiniani and enlist them as soldiers for the urgent defense of Syria against the Parthians. Unfortunately, the Gabiniani subjected these two sons to torture and murder, possibly with covert encouragement from rebellious senior administrators within Cleopatra's court. Cleopatra, in response, sent the Gabiniani responsible for the crime to Bibulus as prisoners awaiting judgment. However, Bibulus returned them to Cleopatra, rebuking her for interfering in what he deemed the Roman Senate's prerogative. Aligning with Pompey in Caesar's civil war, Bibulus proved unsuccessful in preventing Caesar from deploying a naval fleet in Greece, ultimately enabling Caesar to pursue Pompey and reach Egypt. By August 29, 51 BC, official documents began to recognize Cleopatra as the sole ruler, indicating her rejection of her brother Ptolemy XIII as a co-ruler. Although it's likely that she had married him, there is no recorded evidence of this union. The Ptolemaic tradition of sibling marriage, initiated by Ptolemy II and his sister Arsinoe II, was a long-standing Egyptian royal practice but was despised by contemporary Greeks. Despite this, during Cleopatra's reign, it became a widely accepted arrangement for Ptolemaic rulers. Despite Cleopatra's disapproval, Ptolemy XIII maintained significant support from influential allies, particularly the eunuch Pothinos. Pothinos served as Ptolemy's childhood tutor, regent, and administrator of his properties. Others involved in the conspiracy against Cleopatra included Achilles, a prominent military commander, and Theodotus of Chios, another tutor of Ptolemy XIII. Although Cleopatra initially attempted a brief alliance with her brother Ptolemy XIV. By the autumn of 50 BC, Ptolemy XIII gained the upper hand in their conflict. He started signing documents with his name preceding that of his sister, ultimately establishing his first regnal date in 49 BC. Assassination of Pompey. In the summer of 49 BC, Cleopatra and her forces were still engaged in a conflict with Ptolemy XIII within Alexandria, when Janneus Pompeius, son of Pompey, arrived seeking military assistance for his father. Following Caesar's return to Italy from the wars in Gaul and the crossing of the Rubicon in January 49 BC, Pompey and his supporters were forced to flee to Greece. In what could be considered their final joint decision, both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII agreed to Gnaeus Pompeius's plea and dispatched 60 ships and 500 troops, including the Gabiniani, to aid his father. This action also served to alleviate some of the debt owed to Rome. Facing a deteriorating situation against her brother, Cleopatra was compelled to abandon Alexandria and retreat to the region of Thebes. By the spring of 48 BC, Cleopatra, accompanied by her younger sister Arsinoe IV, traveled to Roman Syria to assemble an invasion force for Egypt. Upon her return with an army, her progress to Alexandria was obstructed by her brother's forces, including Gabiniani mobilized against her. Consequently, she established a camp outside Pelusium in the eastern Nile Delta. In Greece, Caesar and Pompey's forces clashed at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus on August 9, 48 BC, resulting in the destruction of most of Pompey's army and his compelled retreat to Tyre, Lebanon. Given his close ties with the Ptolemies, Pompey ultimately sought refuge in Egypt to rebuild his forces. Ptolemy XIII's advisors, however, were apprehensive about Pompey using Egypt as a base in an extended Roman civil war. In a plot orchestrated by Theodotus, Pompey was lured to Pelusium by a written invitation, only to be ambushed and fatally stabbed on September 28, 48 BC. Ptolemy XIII believed this act showcased his power and diffused the situation by sending Pompey's severed and embalmed head to Caesar, who arrived in Alexandria by early October and took residence at the royal palace. Expressing grief and outrage over Pompey's killing, Caesar called on both Ptolemy and Cleopatra to disband their forces and reconcile. Relationship with Julius Caesar. In 47 BC, Ptolemy XIII defied Caesar's demand to disband his army upon arriving in Alexandria. Cleopatra, initially sending emissaries to Caesar, later came to Alexandria personally upon hearing rumors of Caesar's affairs with royal women. Historical accounts differ, with Cassius Dio suggesting Cleopatra charmed Caesar with her wit, while Plutarch claims she was smuggled into the palace in a bed sack. Ptolemy XIII, upon realizing Cleopatra's presence, tried to incite a riot in Alexandria but was arrested by Caesar, who calmed the crowd with his oratorical skills. Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII were brought before the assembly, where Caesar revealed Ptolemy's will, naming them joint heirs. Caesar attempted to arrange rule for the other siblings, Arsinoe IV and Ptolemy XIV, over Cyprus, aiming to eliminate potential rivals and appease the Ptolemaic subject. Perceiving the agreement favored Cleopatra, Pothios, siding with Ptolemy XIII, decided to have Achilles lead forces to attack both Caesar and Cleopatra. After Caesar executed Pothios, Arsinoe IV allied with Achilles, becoming queen and later having her tutor Ganymedes kill Achilles. Ganymedes then deceived Caesar into requesting Ptolemy XIII as a negotiator, only to have him join Arsinoe IV's army. The resulting siege of the palace, with Caesar and Cleopatra trapped, extended into 47 BC. Between January and March of 47 BC, Caesar received reinforcements, and Ptolemy XIII and Arsinoe IV withdrew to the Nile. In the ensuing battle, Ptolemy XIII attempted to flee by boat but drowned. Ganymedes may have been killed, and Theodotus was later found and executed by Marcus Junius Brutus. Arsinoe IV was paraded in Caesar's triumph in Rome before exile to the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Cleopatra, likely pregnant with Caesar's child, remained absent during these events. Caesar's consul term ended in 48 BC, but with Antony's assistance, he became dictator until October 47 BC, gaining the authority to resolve the dynastic dispute in Egypt, to avoid a female monarch. Caesar appointed Cleopatra's 12-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIV, as joint ruler in a nominal sibling marriage. Cleopatra continued living with Caesar privately. The exact date of Cyprus returning to her control is uncertain. Caesarion, Cleopatra's alleged child with Caesar, was born on June 23, 47 BC. Caesar, publicly silent about Caesarion, left Egypt around April 47 BC to confront Pharnaces II. He left legions under Rufio to secure Cleopatra's position. Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIV visited Rome in late 46 BC, gaining legal status as friends and allies of the Roman people. Cleopatra's presence influenced the Lupercalia festival, where Antony's attempt to crown Caesar was likely staged. Cleopatra stayed in Rome until mid-April, hoping for Caesarion's recognition, but Caesar's will named Octavian as the primary heir. Cleopatra departed for Egypt, later poisoning Ptolemy XIV and elevating Caesarion as co-ruler. Cleopatra in the Liberators' Civil War. In 43 BC, Octavian, Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus joined forces to establish the Second Triumvirate, their goal being to restore order in the Republic and bring justice to those who had assassinated Caesar. Selected for 5-year terms, they embarked on a mission to quell internal strife. Cleopatra found herself caught between messages from Gaius Cassius Longinus and Publius Cornelius Dolabella seeking military aid. Crafting an excuse for Cassius, Cleopatra redirected the legions left by Caesar in Egypt to Dolabella, only for them to be captured by Cassius in Palestine. Facing challenges, Cleopatra sailed to Greece to support Octavian and Antony, but her fleet suffered heavy damage in a storm, arriving too late for the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, where Antony secured victory over Caesar's assassins. Octavian controlled the western half of the Republic, Antony the east, and Lepidus found himself marginalized. In 41 BC, Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in Anatolia. Initially rebuffing his letters, she eventually agreed to meet after persuasion from Antony's envoy Quintus Dellius. The meeting aimed to address Cleopatra's alleged support for Cassius and discuss territorial exchanges in the Levant. Cleopatra sailed to Tarsus on the Thalamigos, hosting lavish banquets for Antony and his officers. During this encounter, Cleopatra cleared her name, explaining her attempts to aid Dolabella and persuaded Antony to exile her sister Arsinoe IV, whom she deemed a threat. Additionally, she secured the execution of her rebellious former governor of Cyprus. Relationship with Mark Antony. In the wake of her departure from Tarsus, Cleopatra extended an invitation to Antony, prompting his visit to Alexandria by November 41 BC. Antony, lauded by the Alexandrian populace for his role in restoring Ptolemy XIII and arriving without an occupying force, relished the royal lifestyle observed during Cleopatra's ship visit to Tarsus. In Egypt, he entrusted subordinates like Publius Ventidius Bassus to expel the Parthians from Anatolia and Syria. Cleopatra strategically selected Antony as her partner for future heirs, given his prominent standing post-Caesar. As a triumvir, Antony possessed authority to return former Ptolemaic territories, like Cilicia and Cyprus, to Cleopatra, achieved by November 38 BC. Around spring 40 BC, Antony departed Egypt due to turmoil in Syria. Cleopatra furnished him with 200 ships for his campaign, establishing correspondence during his absence. By late 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, acknowledged by Antony as his children, symbolizing a new societal era and hinting at hopes for Parthian conquest akin to Alexander the Great. Antony's Parthian campaign faced disruption due to the Perusian War 41-40 BC, initiated by his wife Fulvia against Octavian. The conflict aimed at making Antony Rome's undisputed leader. Fulvia died during the war, leading to Octavian and Antony's reconciliation in September 40 BC. The agreement ceded Italia, Hispania, and Gaul to Octavian and mandated Antony's marriage to Octavia the Younger. In December 40 BC, Cleopatra received Herod in Alexandria, a refugee from Judea. Herod, initially appointed tetrarch by Antony, faced conflict with Antigonus II Mattathias. Cleopatra's attempts to assist Herod were declined, and he traveled to Rome, later becoming king of Judea. Antony's marriage to Octavia and searing her children strained relations with Cleopatra. Despite her secure position in Egypt, her rival Herod faced civil war in Judea without Roman assistance from Cleopatra. The triumvirate, expiring on January 1, 37 BC, was extended to 33 BC at Tarentum, granting Antony 2 legions from Octavian. Summoned to Antioch by Antony to discuss Herod's kingdom and financial support for the Parthian campaign, Cleopatra brought her twins. Antony enlarged Cleopatra's domain, incorporating former Ptolemaic territories in the Levant. The extension of her kingdom included Phoenicia, Ptolemy Acco, Col Syria, part of the Nabatean kingdom, Cyrene, and territories in Roman Crete. Antony's territorial concessions were exploited by Octavian, who capitalized on Roman sentiments against empowering a foreign queen. Octavian granted extraordinary privileges to Octavia and Livia, creating statues to rival Cleopatra's in the Forum of Caesar. In 36 BC, Cleopatra joined Antony in his ill-fated Parthian campaign, later returning to Egypt and giving birth to their second son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, by the summer of 36 BC. Antony's Parthian venture ended disastrously, leading him and Cleopatra back to Alexandria to reunite with their newborn son. Donations of Alexandria. In 35 BC, as Antony planned a Parthian expedition against Armenia, Octavia went to Athens with troops, seemingly in support of Antony but likely orchestrated by Octavian to embarrass him. Antony, despite receiving the troops, abandoned the campaign abruptly, returning to Alexandria with Cleopatra. Octavian capitalized on Antony's setbacks, eliminating rivals in the west. Dellius, Antony's envoy, negotiated a potential marriage alliance with Artavasdes II, the Armenian king, for Alexander Helios, but it was declined. Antony marched into Armenia, defeated its forces, and staged a controversial triumph in Alexandria, criticized in Rome. A gymnasium event saw Cleopatra and her children declared rulers of various territories. Antony and Cleopatra may have wed during this ceremony. Antony's report on the donations of Alexandria was censored by the consuls, both Antony's support. In late 34 BC, Antony and Octavian engaged in a heated propaganda war. Antony claimed Octavian had illegally deposed Lepidus and accused Octavian of various wrongdoings. The accusations and gossip shaped perceptions of Cleopatra. Cleopatra was portrayed as dangerous, accused of brainwashing Antony with witchcraft. Allegations like dissolving a valuable pearl in vinegar were later proven fabrications. A papyrus document from February 33 BC bears Cleopatra's signature addressing tax exemptions in Egypt, possibly written by an authorized official. A subscript, likely Cleopatra's autograph, reads, "Make it happen or so be it," following Ptolemaic practice to avoid forgery. The Battle of Actium. As Octavian assumed consulship on January 1, 33 BC, he accused Antony in a Senate speech of jeopardizing Roman freedoms and unity under the influence of his Eastern queen. Antony, before their joint imperium ended on December 31, 33 BC, declared Syrian the true heir of Caesar, aiming to undermine Octavian. In 32 BC, Antonian loyalists Gaius Sosius and Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus became consuls, attempting to pass legislation against Octavian. Octavian, now a private citizen, accused them in the Senate, prompting the consuls and over 200 senators supporting Antony to flee Rome. Antony and Cleopatra, in 32 BC, traveled to Ephesus, where Cleopatra provided naval support. Ahenobarbus wanted Cleopatra excluded from the campaign against Octavian, but Publius Canidius Crassus argued for her contribution to the war effort. Cleopatra resisted returning to Egypt, believing that blocking Octavian in Greece would better secure her realm. Defections, including Ahenobarbus and Lucius Munatius Plancus, occurred due to Cleopatra's involvement. In the spring of 32 BC, Antony and Cleopatra went to Athens, where Cleopatra convinced Antony to officially divorce Octavia. Plancus advised Octavian to seize Antony's will, leading Octavian to violate sacred rights by acquiring it. Octavian used the will in his propaganda, emphasizing claims like Caesarion as Caesar's heir and Alexandria as the new capital. Octavian's legal standing improved with his election as consul in 31 BC. Antony's will provided the pretext for Rome to declare war on Cleopatra, not Antony, focusing on her military support to a private citizen. Despite having a larger fleet, Antony and Cleopatra faced challenges against Octavian's professional navy. Cleopatra prioritized Egypt's defense, leading to a confrontation at Actium. Allied kings' support wavered, and Antony's camp suffered defections. The Battle of Actium on September 2, 31 BC saw Cleopatra strategically withdrawing with her fleet, avoiding direct engagement. Antony followed, and they escaped to Tainaron, marked by a 3-day voyage where Antony reportedly avoided Cleopatra. The battle continued without them, resulting in significant defections to Octavian's side. Downfall and death. Following Octavian's occupation of Athens, Antony and Cleopatra arrived separately in Egypt. Antony headed to Cyrene to raise more troops, while Cleopatra went to Alexandria's harbor, attempting to create a facade of victory to mislead opposition. Fearful of rebellion upon hearing of the Battle of Actium's outcome, Cleopatra took precautions. There are uncertainties about her executing Artavasdes II at this time to secure an alliance with Artavasdes I of Media Atropatene. News of Octavian's victory reached Lucius Panarius, Antony's appointed governor of Cyrene, before Antony's messengers could arrive. Panarius defected to Octavian, surrendering the legions Antony sought. Devastated, Antony contemplated suicide but was dissuaded by his staff officers. In Alexandria, he secluded himself on the island of Pharaohs. Herod, once an advisor to Antony, resigned his kingship out of loyalty to Antony but impressed Octavian, who allowed him to maintain his position. By late summer 31 BC, Cleopatra may have seen Antony as a liability, planning to leave Egypt to her son Caesarion. Plans changed when Malichus I, following Octavian's governor's advice, burned Cleopatra's fleet, leaving her with no option but to negotiate. Cleopatra, realizing the dire situation, had Caesarion declared the sole ruler of Egypt. Despite separate messages to Octavian, negotiations bore no fruit. In the spring of 30 BC, Octavian invaded Egypt, securing fresh supplies from Herod and Phoenicia. Octavian advanced swiftly, taking Pelusium and defeating Antony's forces. Antony won a small victory outside Alexandria's hippodrome, but on August 1, 30 BC, his fleet and cavalry surrendered to Octavian. Desperate, Cleopatra hid in her tomb, sending a false message of suicide. Antony, believing her dead, took his own life. Octavian entered Alexandria, seizing Cleopatra's children. In a meeting with Octavian, Cleopatra asserted she would not be led in a triumph. Octavian promised her life but remained silent about Egypt's future. Upon learning Octavian planned to move her to Rome, Cleopatra prepared for suicide. On August 10, 30 BC, at age 39, she died, possibly from a snake bite or poison. Octavian, angered but respecting her royal status, had her buried next to Antony. Caesarion, sent away by Cleopatra, was later executed by Octavian. With the fall of the Ptolemaic kingdom, Egypt became a Roman province in 30 BC, marking the end of the Hellenistic era. In 27 BC, Octavian was renamed Augustus, inaugurating the Principate era of the Roman Empire.